Area saw 342 fentanyl-related overdose deaths. That's according to the Pima County Medical Examiner's Office. Now, just last month, local and federal...
Nearly $80 million worth of cocaine has been stopped from coming into the United States.
Yeah, John and Rashi, the FBI showed up early and in force.
Breaking tonight, federal agents just stormed a quiet residential block in Marysville, Washington, tearing down the walls of what appeared to be an ordinary suburban home. What they found inside has sent shockwaves through law enforcement agencies across the Pacific Northwest and beyond. 4 suspects in custody, a cache of military-grade weapons, and a drug trafficking operation valued at over $150 million, one of the largest cartel-linked busts in Washington state history. This isn't just another drug raid. This is the culmination of a months-long undercover investigation that exposes how deep the roots of international drug cartels have grown into American neighborhoods. The kind of neighborhoods where kids ride bikes, where families walk their dogs, where no one suspects that behind closed doors, a criminal empire is operating in plain sight. Federal sources are calling this a watershed moment. ICE agents and Border Patrol tactical units descended on the location just 3 minutes ago. Yes, you heard that right, 3 minutes ago. The operation is still unfolding as we speak. Officers are combing through evidence. Forensic teams are cataloging substances. And the full scope of what they've uncovered is only beginning to emerge. The address? A single-family home on the 4700 block of 108th Street Northeast in Marysville. From the outside, nothing out of the ordinary. Beige siding, trimmed lawn, a detached garage. But inside, agents discovered something that looked more like a fortified cartel stronghold than a suburban residence. Let's walk through what happened step by step because the timeline of this operation reveals just how coordinated and how dangerous this takedown really was. 5:47 a.m., the breach. Before sunrise, under the cover of darkness, ICE tactical units and Border Patrol agents positioned themselves around the target residence. Armored vehicles blocked both ends of the street. Neighbors were still asleep. The air was cold, silent, tense. At exactly 5:47 a.m., agents breached the front door with a battering ram. Flashbang grenades lit up the interior. Agents flooded into the home, weapons drawn, shouting commands in both English and Spanish. 4 individuals were inside, 2 men, 2 women, all immediately subdued and placed in flex cuffs. No shots were fired. But the tension was palpable. These weren't amateurs. These were suspects who had been operating under the radar for years, connected to networks that stretch from Sinaloa, Mexico, all the way to the Canadian border. 5:52 a.m., the first discovery. Within minutes of entry, agents made their first major discovery in the master bedroom. Beneath a false floor panel, hidden under carpeting and plywood, was a steel-reinforced compartment containing over 40 kilograms of pure methamphetamine. That's 88 pounds. Street value? Conservatively, over $2 million. But that wasn't all. Stacked alongside the meth were bricks of fentanyl. Compressed, vacuum-sealed, stamped with cartel insignias. The kind of fentanyl that's killing Americans by the thousands. The kind that's flooding cities like Seattle, Tacoma, Spokane, and now apparently Marysville. Agents immediately secured the bedroom and called in DA specialists to handle the substances. The risk of contamination is real. Fentanyl can kill on contact. 1 grain the size of a few salt crystals can be lethal. The team suited up in hazmat gear and began the painstaking process of cataloging every single package. 6:15 a.m., the arsenal. The second major discovery came in the basement. Agents descended the stairs and found what can only be described as a personal armory. Assault rifles, semi-automatic handguns, shotguns. Over 24 firearms in total, many of them untraceable. Serial numbers filed off, parts modified, mechanisms altered to increase lethality. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Among the weapons were several AR-15 style rifles equipped with high-capacity magazines, armor-piercing rounds, tactical vests, night vision goggles. This wasn't just self-defense. This was preparation for warfare. Federal agents believe these weapons were intended for protection of the operation, and potentially for use in territorial disputes with rival trafficking networks. Marysville, a city of just over 70,000 people sitting less than 40 miles north of Seattle, has become a key distribution hub. Why? Because it's close to major highways, close to the Canadian border, and it's under the radar. Cartels don't pick locations randomly. They choose places where law enforcement presence is lighter, where surveillance is less intensive, and where they can blend into the community. Marysville fit the profile perfectly. 6:43 a.m., the money room. As agents continued their sweep, they found a locked door on the second floor. Reinforced. Deadbolt from the inside. They breached it with a hydraulic spreader, a tool typically used to pry open car doors in accidents. What they found inside was staggering. Stacks upon stacks of cash. Bundled in shrink wrap. Sorted by denomination. Tens, 20s, 50s, hundreds. All of it packed into duffel bags, storage bins, and even a commercial-grade floor safe that required a safecracker to open. Preliminary counts estimate over $4 million in cash was seized from that single room. $4 million. In a house in Marysville, Washington. Let that sink in. This wasn't drug money waiting to be laundered. This was operational capital. Money used to pay off couriers. To bribe officials. To purchase more product. To fund the expansion of a network that federal investigators now believe stretches across at least 5 states. Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and North Dakota. 7:20 a.m., the lab. The garage had been converted into something else entirely. Not a place to park cars. A place to process drugs. Agents found industrial scales. Cutting agents. Mixing bowls. Heat presses used to compact powders into bricks. Vacuum sealers. Packaging materials stamped with cartel logos. This was a fully operational drug lab. A place where bulk shipments of methamphetamine and fentanyl were broken down, repackaged, and prepared for distribution to street-level dealers across the region. Forensic teams are still analyzing residue samples, but early tests confirmed the presence of multiple controlled substances, including meth, fentanyl, cocaine, and MDMA. This wasn't a single-product operation. This was a one-stop shop for synthetic and traditional narcotics. The sheer volume of equipment suggests this location had been active for months, possibly years. How did it go undetected for so long? That's the question federal investigators are now asking, and the answer could point to failures in local oversight or worse, potential corruption. 8:05 a.m., the suspects. Let's talk about who was inside the house. 4 individuals. All adults. All now facing federal charges that could result in life imprisonment. The first suspect, a 34-year-old male, is believed to be the primary operator of the Marysville location. Federal sources say he has ties to the Sinaloa cartel, one of the most powerful and violent drug trafficking organizations in the world. His role? Logistics coordinator. He managed shipments. He communicated with suppliers in Mexico. He oversaw distribution to regional dealers. The second suspect, a 29-year-old male, is described as an enforcer. His criminal record includes prior arrests for assault, weapons possession, and witness intimidation. His job in this operation? Security. Making sure no one talked. Making sure no one stole. And making sure rival traffickers stayed away. The third and fourth suspects, both women in their early 30s, are believed to be couriers and processors. They handled the cutting and packaging of drugs. They transported cash. They acted as the public face of the operation, going to the grocery store, picking up mail, maintaining the appearance of normalcy. All 4 suspects are currently being held without bail at a federal detention facility. They've been charged with conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, possession with intent to distribute, money laundering, and weapons violations. More charges are expected as the investigation continues. 9:30 a.m., the forensic sweep. By mid-morning, the scene had transformed into a full-scale forensic operation. DA chemists, FBI evidence technicians, ATF firearms specialists, ICE intelligence analysts, all working in tandem to document every inch of the property. Agents seized dozens of cell phones, laptops, hard drives, ledgers written in code, encrypted messaging apps, burner phones with only a handful of contacts. This is the digital backbone of a trafficking network, and investigators believe it will lead them to higher-level operatives. One laptop, found in the money room, is reportedly password protected with military-grade encryption. Federal cyber teams are working to crack it. What's inside could reveal names, locations, shipment routes, payment records, everything needed to dismantle the entire network. The forensic sweep is expected to take days. Every surface will be swabbed for fingerprints. Every item will be photographed and cataloged. Every digital device will be cloned and analyzed. This is not a quick process. This is the methodical unraveling of a criminal conspiracy that has likely claimed lives, destroyed families, and poisoned communities. The bigger picture, a $150 million empire. Here's what federal investigators are saying off the record. This Marysville location is just one node in a much larger network. A network that moves drugs, guns, and cash across the western United States and into Canada. Based on the volume of drugs seized, the cash on hand, and the intelligence gathered from surveillance and wiretaps, investigators estimate this operation generated over $150 million in revenue over the past 3 years. $150 million. That money didn't stay in Marysville. It flowed south, back to cartel bosses in Mexico. It funded violence. It funded corruption. It funded the expansion of trafficking routes that are now feeding addiction and overdose crises in cities and towns across America. The Marysville bust is significant not just because of what was seized, but because of what it represents. It's proof that cartel operations are no longer confined to border states. They've moved inland. They've embedded themselves in suburban communities. They're operating in places where people feel safe, and that's exactly why they're so dangerous. Why Marysville? Marysville is a growing city. It's located along Interstate 5, the main north-south highway on the west coast. It's less than an hour from Seattle. It's close to the Canadian border, a critical crossing point for smuggling operations. And it's a community where a house full of people coming and going at odd hours might not raise immediate suspicion. Cartels are strategic. They don't pick locations at random. They analyze traffic patterns. They study law enforcement deployment. They identify weak points in the system. And they exploit them. Marysville became a target because it offered everything traffickers need: access, anonymity, and proximity to both supply routes and demand centers. Seattle is one of the largest drug markets in the Pacific Northwest. Overdose deaths have surged in recent years. Fentanyl, in particular, has become a leading cause of death among young adults in Washington state. The drugs processed in that Marysville garage were destined for Seattle streets. For Tacoma. For Everett. For Vancouver, British Columbia. For communities where parents are burying their children. Where emergency rooms are overwhelmed. Where Narcan is being distributed like candy because it's the only thing standing between life and death. Federal response: a coordinated effort. This raid wasn't the result of luck. It was the result of months of coordination between multiple federal agencies. ICE's Homeland Security Investigations Unit. Border Patrol's tactical teams. The FBI. The ATF. Even local Marysville police, who provided critical intelligence about suspicious activity in the area. Federal sources say the investigation began with a traffic stop. A vehicle registered to the Marysville address was pulled over for a broken taillight. The driver consented to a search. Inside, agents found a small amount of methamphetamine and a burner phone with encrypted messaging apps. That traffic stop led to surveillance. Surveillance led to wiretaps. Wiretaps led to undercover operations. And undercover operations led to this morning's raid. This is how modern law enforcement works. It's not dramatic. It's not cinematic. It's painstaking, methodical, intelligence-driven work. It's thousands of hours of listening to phone calls, tracking vehicles, analyzing financial transactions, building a case brick by brick until there's enough evidence to move in. And when they moved in, they moved hard. No warnings. No second chances. Just overwhelming force designed to neutralize the threat and secure the evidence. The role of ICE and Border Patrol. Some people might wonder, why ICE? Why Border Patrol? This is a drug bust, not an immigration raid. Here's the reality. ICE's Homeland Security Investigations Division is one of the most powerful tools in the federal government's arsenal against transnational crime. They don't just handle immigration violations. They handle human trafficking, money laundering, arms smuggling, and drug trafficking tied to international criminal organizations. Border Patrol isn't just stationed at the border. They operate throughout border zones, areas within 100 miles of any U.S. border. That includes Marysville, which is less than 70 miles from the Canadian border. Border Patrol has jurisdiction. And they have specialized tactical units trained for exactly this kind of operation. The involvement of these agencies signals something important. This isn't a local crime problem. This is a national security threat. Cartels are not street gangs. They're sophisticated, militarized criminal enterprises with resources that rival small nations. They corrupt officials. They infiltrate legitimate businesses. They use violence to maintain control. Taking them down requires the full weight of federal law enforcement. And that's exactly what happened in Marysville today. The weapons, a disturbing arsenal. Let's go back to the weapons for a moment because this detail is critical. Over 24 firearms were seized from the Marysville location. Many of them illegal. Many of them modified. And many of them capable of inflicting mass casualties. Assault rifles with filed-off serial numbers are not hunting weapons. They're not for sport. They're for killing people. And they're often used in cartel violence, shootouts with rival traffickers, confrontations with law enforcement of territory. The presence of armor-piercing ammunition is especially troubling. This type of ammo is designed to penetrate body armor, the kind worn by police officers and federal agents. Its presence suggests the suspects were prepared for a confrontation with law enforcement. They were ready to shoot their way out if necessary. Thankfully, that didn't happen. The element of surprise, combined with overwhelming tactical superiority, meant the suspects were subdued without a single shot fired. But make no mistake, this could have gone very differently. Lives could have been lost. And the fact that these weapons were in a suburban home, just blocks away from an elementary school, should alarm every parent in that community. The money, laundering and corruption. $4 million in cash. Let's talk about what that means. You don't accumulate $4 million in cash by selling drugs on street corners. You accumulate it through large-scale distribution. Through moving kilos, not grams. Through supplying dealers across multiple cities and states. But here's the problem with cash. It's heavy, it's bulky, and it's traceable if you try to deposit it in a bank. So cartels have to launder it. They funnel it through legitimate businesses. Car washes, restaurants, construction companies. They buy real estate. They purchase luxury goods that can be resold. They use shell companies and offshore accounts to obscure the money's origin. Federal investigators are now tracing the financial networks connected to this Marysville operation. They're looking at bank accounts, business registrations, property records, wire transfers, every financial footprint left behind. And here's where it gets even more disturbing. Money laundering often requires inside help. Someone at a bank who looks the other way. Someone at a real estate office who doesn't ask questions. Someone in local government who fast-tracks permits or ignores red flags. Corruption is the grease that keeps cartel operations running smoothly. And federal investigators are now asking, who helped these suspects? Who enabled them? Who profited from their success? Expect more arrests. Expect more raids. This is just the beginning. The drugs, a deadly combination. Methamphetamine and fentanyl. Two of the deadliest drugs on American streets. And both were found in massive quantities in Marysville. Methamphetamine destroys lives. It's highly addictive. It ravages the body. It causes psychosis, heart failure, organ damage. It turns people into shells of who they once were. And it's cheap. Readily available. Easy to manufacture in clandestine labs using precursor chemicals smuggled in from China and Mexico. Fentanyl is even worse. It's a synthetic opioid 50 times more potent than heroin. 2 milligrams, an amount that would fit on the tip of a pencil, can kill an adult. It's often mixed with other drugs without the user's knowledge. People think they're taking heroin or oxycodone, but what they're actually taking is fentanyl. And they die. The CDC estimates that over 70,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in the most recent year on record. Fentanyl was involved in the majority of those deaths. It's not an epidemic. It's a massacre. And it's being fueled by criminal organizations that don't care how many people die as long as the money keeps flowing. The drugs seized in Marysville would have flooded the market. They would have been cut, packaged, and sold to dealers. Those dealers would have sold to users. And those users would have risked their lives with every dose. How many lives were saved by this raid? We'll never know. But it's not zero. Community impact, fear and relief. Residents of the 4700 block of 108th Street Northeast are waking up to a reality they never imagined. Their quiet neighborhood was home to a drug trafficking operation worth $150 million. The people living next door weren't who they seemed. The normalcy was a facade. Some neighbors reported seeing unusual activity in recent months. Cars coming and going at odd hours. People carrying heavy bags in and out of the garage. Occasional visitors who didn't look like typical suburban residents. But no one said anything. Why? Because they didn't want to seem nosy. Because they didn't want to jump to conclusions. Because they trusted that if something was wrong, someone else would notice. This is the challenge law enforcement faces. Criminal organizations thrive in environments where people mind their own business. Where suspicion is dismissed. Where the benefit of the doubt is given freely. Federal agents are now urging residents. If you see something, say something. Don't assume someone else will report it. Don't assume it's nothing. Trust your instincts. Make the call. Let law enforcement investigate. In this case, it was a traffic stop that cracked the case. But it could just as easily have been a concerned neighbor. The legal process, what happens next? The 4 suspects are now in federal custody. They'll be arraigned in federal court within the next 72 hours. They'll face a magistrate judge who will determine whether they can be released on bail or whether they'll remain detained pending trial. Given the severity of the charges, drug trafficking, weapons violations, money laundering, it's almost certain they'll be held without bail. Federal prosecutors will argue that they're flight risks, that they have ties to international criminal organizations, that they pose a danger to the community. Defense attorneys will try to negotiate plea deals. In exchange for cooperation, providing names, locations, details of the operation, prosecutors might reduce charges or recommend lighter sentences. But here's the reality: federal drug trafficking convictions carry mandatory minimum sentences. 10 years, 20 years, life in prison for the most serious offenses. And the